I'm Nell Diamond and you're watching Disney Channel. Dreams do come true.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome back, or welcome to my channel if you are new here. Today, as you can tell by the title, I'm going to be going through the books on my February TBR, so if you were interested to see what those books are, then keep on watching. So, I have a stack of books next to me, and I also have a couple that I don't physically own, so if I do end up reading them, I'll be reading them as ebooks. But, just to be clear before we get started, I do not plan on reading every single book that is on this TBR. This is kind of just like a list of books for me to choose from. Obviously, as you can tell by the way that I'm dressed, this is for the girl band Readathon, but some of these books will also be used for the Bookymon prompts as well. So the first prompt for Team Cheetah Girls is worth 10 points, and it is to read a book with a cat on it. And for that prompt, I would be reading Start a Villain by John Scalzi. I think that's how you say the name. And this book, from what little I know about it, is basically about this guy whose, I think, uncle passes away, and his uncle passes down like the business to him, and his uncle owns or like runs a supervillain business or something like that, and so he has to like take on this company. The guy in charge or whatever is like a cat or something like that. There's also, I think, possibly other supervillain companies that like exist, and so he's in the middle of like a war between like his supervillains versus like the other company's supervillains or something like that. I don't really know, but it sounds pretty funny. The other book that I read by this author, I read it back in November. It was The President's Brain is Missing, and I thought that book was really humorous and I really enjoyed it. It was a short story, so I am excited to read another book by this author. Again, I don't know if I will actually get to it this month, but if I do, I think that this book will also be pretty fast-paced and humorous just from what I know of this author's writing. So yeah, it sounds pretty good, sounds pretty interesting, pretty funny, humorous, lighthearted, so looking forward to it. The next prompt is also worth 10 points, and it is to read a book with an animal on the cover, and for this I picked Bunny by Mona Awad. Because I've heard this book is so weird, I feel like anything that anybody would tell me about this book would probably give away too much. I know this book is like controversial in terms of like whether or not people like it. I know it's very like hit or miss for people. I've had this on my shelf for a while, so this would also go towards my goal of like trying to read books off of my physical TBR like I talked about in my goals video. But yeah, I want to read this because I want to know what people are talking about when they talk about this book and they say how weird it is and stuff, and how it doesn't make sense, and you have to like watch videos of people like explaining the ending, and I don't think I've read anything like that before, so this would be my first kind of venture into that type of writing. I won't say that I'm excited because I'm honestly kind of nervous, but very interested, very intrigued by this book. So yeah, if I decide to complete that prompt, this is the book that I will be reading for that. The next prompt is worth 20 points, and it is to read a book that is set in New York City, and for that I would be reading The Heart of the Deal by Lindsay, who was the author? Lindsay McMillan, I guess is the author, and I believe this is this author's debut book. I talked about this in my self-destruct video, so I definitely would like to read this because I am supposed to be reading this at some point this year, or otherwise I have to unhaul it. I actually did read the synopsis of this, and it's pretty vague. It's basically about this girl who is on the verge of turning 30. The dating scene is not great. She lives in New York City, hence the reason why I'm reading it for this prompt, and she meets this guy named Dustin, and it says that Dustin's story is complicated, and so there's no way to predict what their future is gonna look like, and I don't know what that means. Like, that's super vague. And then it says like, is she gonna be able to kind of let go of the idea of what she thought 30 would be like versus what 30 is actually like. It's a romance. I'm hoping that it's a rom-com. I don't actually know how funny it is, but I'm assuming that it's going to be because in the synopsis it talked about the main character and like her best friend getting together and like eating ice cream and talking about all their horrible dates. So that sounds great. That's right up my alley. I love stuff like that. So I'm hoping that this will be a winner. So yeah, this will be the book that I will be picking up if I decide to complete this prompt. The next Cheetah Girls prompt is also worth 20 points, and it is to read a highly anticipated title, and for this I would be reading Only If You're Lucky by Stacey Willingham. It is one of the books that I included in my most anticipated releases for 2024. It is a thriller. It is Stacey Willingham's, I think, third book. I've read the first two. Granted, it's not a series, but I read her first two books, so definitely want to pick this one up. The first one that I read, which was her debut, I gave 5 stars. The second one I think I gave like 4 point something stars to. So far this author has done a good job in rating books that I enjoy. But this story basically follows 2 friends. I think it's like Margot and Lucy are their names, and they are rooming together. They're college students. They're rooming together in an off-campus apartment, and I think there's like a frat boy that lives next door or across the street or something that like gets murdered, and then one of the roommates ends up going missing, and it's a thriller. So very excited to see. This is definitely going to be different from her other work because this involves like college age students, so a slightly different age bracket than what this author has written before, which is nice. I'm expecting that we're probably going to get another unreliable narrator because that's what this author just tends to do all the time. So it was an anticipated new release for 2024, but it did come out in January, so I can pick it up. The next prompt is worth 30 points, and it is to read a book with a cover that screams at you. And I don't really know how to interpret that. I don't really know what that means, to be quite honest, but I decided to go with Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke by Eric LaRocca. This is, I believe, a collection of short stories. I don't think it's just one. I think there's like 3 or 4 or something like that in here. But I have never read anything by this author. I actually have 3 of this author's books and haven't read a single one. So I definitely want to read his books. But I chose this one because the cover of this is just kind of like, I don't know, it's very artistic and like cool looking, but also like kind of concerning because it looks like she's like possibly tied up maybe. So I don't know. I mean, I would be screaming if I was tied up. But yeah, I hear good things about this author. I've actually heard good things about this particular collection. I don't hear as much about the other 2 books that I have of his, but this one in particular I have heard quite a bit about over the years. So definitely looking forward to this. Like I said, this is a collection of short stories. They're horror stories, to be more specific. So yeah, if you're looking for a horror book, maybe check this one out. The next prompt is technically worth 30 points, but I will be getting 130 points because the book that I'm planning to read is a host favorite. And the prompt is to read a book with a new to you author, like an author that you've never read before. And so for this, I would plan on reading One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. I believe this is Julie's host pick. And I have had my eye on this series for a little while. It's a book that I've been hearing, you know, more and more about over the last couple of months, and I'm just kind of curious, but I don't actually know really in depth what it's about. So I'm actually going to read the synopsis, which I normally don't do because I don't really know anything about this book. I will read the synopsis for both you and myself. It says, Elspeth Spindle, that's a name, needs more than luck to stay safe in the eerie, mist-locked kingdom of Blunder. She needs a monster. She calls him the Nightmare, an ancient mercurial spirit trapped in her head. He protects her, he keeps her secrets, but nothing comes for free, especially magic. When Elspeth meets a mysterious highwayman on the forest road, her life takes a drastic turn. Thrust into a world of shadow and deception, she joins a dangerous quest to cure Blunder from the dark magic infecting it. And the highwayman, he just so happens to be the king's nephew, captain of the most dangerous men in Blunder, and guilty of high treason. Together they must gather 12 Providence cards, the keys to the cure. But as the stakes heighten and their undeniable attraction intensifies, Elspeth is forced to face her darkest secrets yet. The nightmare is slowly taking over her mind. She might not be able to stop him. Interesting. Okay, so it's kind of like maybe a little bit of a romance between the 2, you know, characters, whatever, but also like there's something in her mind that's like dark and it's taking over. So that's kind of cool. The next prompt is worth 40 points, and this is one that I will for sure be doing. And it is to read a book by a BIPOC or LGBTQ author. And for this, I will be reading A Master of Jin by P. Jelly Clark. This book is the book club pick for February for the Soul Shelf-Set-Up Book Club, so I will have to read this for my own book club. The way the book club is set up, the members get to decide basically what books we read. So I had never even heard of this book until it got nominated for us to read it this year. So I actually have no idea what this is about. I've also never read anything by P. Jelly Clark. So from what I've gathered about this book, it's basically about this girl who's like a secret agent, and she and her colleagues and her girlfriend are trying to investigate this case where someone murdered like this secret brotherhood, and the person that did it is claiming that they are this other person who like died so many years ago, like back, like returned to for justice or something or whatever, and like they don't think that it's really this person back from the dead. They think that it's an imposter, and so they're trying to investigate this and figure out who murdered this brotherhood. I know that there's like magic, obviously based on the title, there's like magic and stuff involved, so I'm very interested to see what this book is all about. The next prompt is also worth 40 points, and it is to read a book that starts with a C. And for this, I would be reading Carrie Soto Is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I have read all of the other books that are part of this universe. This is the last one that came out, but it's also the last one that I have to read. And I have put this off for so long, mainly because it was about tennis. and I just didn't care about tennis. I don't care about sports at all, to be quite honest. So reading a book about a sport just didn't seem that interesting to me. Reading a book about an athlete didn't seem that interesting to me. Now I know, before you guys comment away down below, I know that people have said that, like, even though she is a tennis player, like, it's so much more than that. Like, it's so good. Like, even if you don't understand tennis, even if you don't like tennis, like, you'll still really enjoy it. So that is the reason why it is on this TBR. I did really like Kstto when you get to see her for a brief scene in Malibu Rising. Loved her. She was a wild banshee in that scene, and I absolutely loved every second of it. So I am curious to know more about her story, and I really want to see, like, more about her, because obviously the little snippet that we get of her in Malibu Rising is like, okay, she's having a bad day. This is her having a really bad day, but, like, I do want to get to see more of her character and what she's like. I mean, I've heard she's a real bitch, but, like, that could be interesting too. So if I end up doing this prompt, this is the book that I will be reading. The next prompt is worth 50 points, and this one is to read a book with the words girl, step, party, or together in the title. And so for this, I plan to read Girl on the Porch by Richard Chismar, or Kismar, I'm not sure how you say the last name. But this book basically follows this family who, I think their neighbor comes to them and mentions something about there being someone ringing their doorbell last night. And so they go back and they check the security footage, and they see, like, this woman, like, frantically, like, ringing the doorbell, and she has, like, a shackle hanging from her arm. And then she eventually gives up and she runs out into the night. And then it's all over the news. They assumed that with the footage being everywhere that eventually someone would come forward, or the police would figure it out, basically, is what they assumed. But then nothing happens of it, nothing comes of it. They don't find the woman, and then slowly but surely some weird things start happening to that family whose doorbell she was ringing. Like, people start following them, and then there are, like, mysterious footprints that show up. Just some weird things in the neighborhood. I know this book said something like it'll make you question your neighbors or something after you read this book. So the synopsis kind of reminded me of, what was that show called? I think it was called, like, The Watcher on Netflix. It was kind of giving me those vibes, so that's what made me kind of intrigued and wanting to pick this book up. And it's also pretty short, so yeah, I'll definitely be checking this one out. And then the last prompt is also worth 50 points, but it is to read a book that you have considered getting rid of. So again, another book off of my self-destruct list, and that is All the Best Liars by Amelia Kahani. This is a YA thriller, I believe, and from the synopsis, which doesn't really give you a whole lot to work with, it basically says it's about these three girls who are, or like were, best friends, and they grew up in this town together, and they've always dreamt of, like, getting out of this town. And it says, I think, like 2 weeks before graduation, or 2 weeks before, like, the end of the school year, there's some kind of fire. And I guess the three girls basically got what they wanted. They were able to escape this town, but not in the way that they had hoped, or not in the way that they expected. And it said that one of them will do it by dying, which means that one of them is probably going to die in this fire. One of them does it by lying, which I'm not sure exactly what that means. And the other one will take the fall. So I'm guessing maybe, like, one of them set the fire, killed the other one, and then blamed the other one. And so one of them's dead, one of them's in jail, and the other one got away with it, I guess. I don't really know. That's just what I'm guessing from the little bit of a synopsis that you get for this book. I definitely need to get it read this year, or else I have to unhaul it without reading it. So I'm trying to prioritize this and Heart of the Deal as well, because both of those books are on my self-destruct list. Very high priority for this month. Moving on to some of the steals that I plan on doing. The first one is from the Spice Girls team, and it is to read a book that starts with an S. And it actually wasn't even my idea to read this book. It was actually a member of Team Spice Girls that even encouraged me to read this book at this time. And it is Suburban Hell by, who is the author of this? Maureen Kilmer. I will be buddy reading this with Danny, who is one of the co-hosts for Team Spice Girls. She was like, hey, do you want to buddy read this in February? And I was like, sure, if you want me to steal points from your team, absolutely. So I'll be buddy reading this. From what I remember about this book and, like, the synopsis or whatever, it's basically about, like, these, you know, housewives, and they create, like, some kind of, like, clubhouse basically for the moms or the housewives or whatever, and they do some kind of ritual or something that awakens, like, a demon or something, and one of them gets possessed, and they are trying to figure out, like, how to get their friend unpossessed. Something like that. I think it's supposed to be, it's definitely a horror. Obviously, you can tell by the cover, it's pretty much a horror. No surprise there. But I think it's supposed to be more of like a humorous horror and not like a super scary horror. So I'm very interested. I don't think that I've read anything like that before, but it sounds sounded pretty funny, it sounded pretty interesting, and I love reading about like rich people doing like crazy funny things. So yeah, looking forward to buddy reading this with Danny and stealing the Spice Girl points. The next prompt that I plan to steal is from, I think, also Team Spice Girls, and it is to read a book by an author from the UK. And so for this, I'm also doing a buddy read for 1984. Brittany and Kelsey from the B&K Book Club are hosting this like read along for 1984 by George Orwell. This wasn't a book that was like required reading for me when I was in school. Not that I would have read it anyway. So I had never even heard of this book until 2020 when the pandemic hit. I remember my dad talking about this book. And so it's been a book that I've been curious about for a long time. I just have never actually gotten around to reading it. So the fact that Brittany and Kelsey are hosting this read along, I was like, well, now's the perfect time. And it helps that I get to steal points. Speaking of Brittany, the next prompt that I plan to steal, I actually don't remember whose team this prompt is from. It might be Destiny's Child, but I don't remember. Don't quote me on that. But it is something along the lines of like read a book that you've like seen or heard like bad reviews about. And for this prompt, I plan to read Icebreaker by Hannah Grace. Now, if you have been around the booktube space, like the besties, you know that this book has caused much controversy. And I'm here for it, and I'm excited to read this book. I wanted to actually read this book last February, and I just didn't get around to it, and so I'm determined now to read it. Even before the controversy about this book broke out, I was determined to read this in February because I'm gonna have to redeem myself from last year. But when the controversy broke out, they gave me even more of a reason to prioritize this book and make sure that I read it, because I need to know how I feel. I need to know if I am like team Rainy Kelsey or if I am team Neva Brittany. I don't know where I'm gonna fall, so this will be a fun experience. I'm thinking about possibly even vlogging this, but I don't know. You guys let me know down below in the comments if you guys would want to see that. But yes, we'll definitely be reading this book in February. The next steal, I think, again, I don't know what team this is from. It might be from Destiny's Child. I don't remember. But it is to read like a book that intimidates you or something like that. And for this is another buddy read. Or not buddy read, it's a read along that Katie from I Would Rather Be Reading is hosting. And it is 11/22/63. And this book is so ginormous. I'm currently on chapter 12. So that's how far I've made it into this like 850 page book. So this will be something that I will be slowly reading throughout the month because this book is so big. This involves time travel, and you guys know that I love time travel. That is one of the many things, like many tropes that I enjoy is like time manipulation. So you had me at time travel. The fact that this book is so big is a little like, but because it involves time travel, I'm willing to suffer through the length of this book. And so far it's actually been really interesting. I've actually, you know, like I said, I'm 12 chapters in and I'm enjoying it so far. There are some moments that are problematic for sure, but overall I think that this is an interesting story and I'm curious to see where it's going to go from here. And then the next and final book in this list is for the ultimate buddy read. It is Rainy's host favorite, and that is A River Enchanted. Again, another book that I know absolutely nothing about. Never even heard of this book until Rainy put it as her host favorite. My understanding is that this book follows this guy named Jack who is studying music at university, and some girls start going missing, and so he's summoned to basically try to help rescue them or find them or something. And they believe that the spirits took these girls, and I guess the spirits respond to music, so he's gonna try to use like his musical abilities or whatever to try to like get these girls returned. And then there's also some heiress that I think there's like an enemies to lovers romance thing happening there between Jack and this heiress girl, and they're like working together to try to get the girls back. But also there's like some deeper secrets that they don't know about that I guess they're going to discover along the way about the like isle that they live on and where these girls are going missing. So it sounds pretty interesting, to be quite honest. I had never heard of this book before, but I'm actually glad that I have heard of it now because it does sound pretty interesting. It's giving, you know, mystery, it's giving romance, you know, romantasy, enemies to lovers. Like, I'm here for it. And there's also magic. Like I said, I don't know if I'm going to get to all of these books. Actually, no, let me take that back. I know for sure that I'm not going to get to all of these books. So the interesting part will be to see which ones I do end up reading and more importantly finishing before the month ends. I have an exam that I have to take at the beginning of March. So February is definitely going to be dedicated a lot to studying. So I'm going to have to try to find a balance between studying and like reading these books. And so we'll see how the month ends up turning out in the end. Those are all the books. Thank you so much for watching. If you made it this far into the video, be sure to drop down below in the comments a cheetah and a purple heart emoji. Also comment down below if you have read any of these books and what your thoughts are on them, what you rated them, or if you have any of these same books on your TBR for February, let me know that as well. If you are participating in any of the buddy reads that I mentioned, let me know that down below in the comments. As always, my socials and links will be down below in the description box. Be sure to like this video before you go. That would help me out so much. And subscribe, of course, if you are not already subscribed. I'd love to have you as part of the family. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.